here in the Northwest. Look at this day. We'll pay for it soon enough when winter gets here. That's the story, right? So I'm kind of wondering about this parking brake on the F-250 here. This is a 2001 F-250 Superduty with the 7.3. Put that on, it goes pretty much all the way to the floor. And it doesn't really, whoops, that's the hood. It doesn't really do a whole lot. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do is take the rear wheels off, pull the calipers, pull the rotors, take a look at what's going on in there. Okay, so I've got it all set up on the jack stands, getting ready to take the rear wheels off. Socket 21. Socket is a 21. When you take one of these calipers off, you need to compress the pistons inside. The way I do it, probably a lot of people do it, they use a big C-clamp. This is an 8-inch C-clamp, but make sure you get one that's small enough. You know, don't get one with a big massive foot on it. Get one with a foot that'll fit in this depression right here, because you need to put one on the brake pad here and the other end of it on the caliper itself. And then when you tighten that, you'll see that it pushes. See this crack open up right here? Now that piston's compressed and you'll be able to get this off a lot easier. Otherwise you got to pry on it with screwdrivers and all that junk, and it's a pain in the butt. So just use a C-clamp. And now it's pretty much ready to take off. There's two sets of bolts back here. These are the caliper slide pin bolts. This bolt here, the bigger one, that's for the caliper bracket. So we're going to have to take all four of these out. The first ones I'm going to take out are these two right here, the smaller ones, and they shouldn't be very tight. I think they're only torqued to, I want to say 61 foot-pounds or even way less than that. I'll go over it when I get to that point, but these shouldn't be super tight, so you just need to take a ratchet and a socket and take those bolts out. 14 millimeter. I'm using a deep just so I don't have to use an extension. Give it a little very subtle cinch first and then back it off. I'm just going to loosen that one. Again, I give them a reel just a touch to the tight side and then back it off. I just find I break less bolts off doing that. You know, if you crack them going in tighter, they seem, I don't know, they seem to, these don't corrode up too bad anyway, but okay, so there. Now see, that caliper just wants to almost fall off. And then I have a piece of wire handy to hang it so that it doesn't stress on the brake hose. Let's see here. There. I'll find a place over here to hang this. That'll do. Okay, so I'm hanging that right there like this. Now we're down to just the caliper bracket and the rotor itself. These are a metric 19. brake pads are new. Alright. Now we should be able to get this drum off of here. Maybe. Might have to beat on it some. They're kind of notoriously hard to get off, so let's give that a go. Oh, piece of cake. Yikes. Okay, there it is. It's just pretty simple. Just got to get that spring out. It goes in. These face towards the drive line. These tangs face toward the drive line. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take... This is the adjuster. This is the adjuster right here. These should come loose now, I believe. I can just spread this, knock the adjuster out of the way. It's loose. And then spread these open and remove them through the top. Let's see how that goes. That's a big, okay. There's the adjuster. Okay. Sorry about that. So let me see if I can even salvage this video at all on this project. This is rebuilding the parking brakes on my 2001 Ford F-250 Super Duty with the 7.3 Lariat E-Cab extend cab truck. So here we are. This one is all put back together and rebuilt. And you'll notice too that the hub assembly is no longer there. The axle and hub assembly has been removed. It's because I would defy anybody to try to put this together without pulling the hubs off. I watched a couple of YouTube videos, and the one for sure where the guy put this back together, I went and took a quick peek at it. It's not this axle. It's I don't know what rig he's actually working on there. He's got 2 or 3 rigs listed in excursions and shit like that. But the bottom line is that it's not this rig. So I had to pull the axle and hub assembly off, which I'll go over in brief since it's already been done on both sides, and I didn't film it. When I pulled the other side last night, it was too dark to film. So here we are. This side is back together, and believe me, fellas, ladies and gents, it was a struggle to get this back together. But we're going to do it on the other side, fear not, because it looks like this. So, let me go over quickly what you have to go through to get the axles and the hub off of there. But the upside, it's not a complete loss actually, the more I think about it. I'm going to justify taking it apart because we've never laid eyes on the rear wheel bearings of this truck before. This truck's got 143,000 miles on it, so it's right in that phase where things like this start to go. And now the frictions on these, and this one's rusty as hell, aren't bad. I probably could have just got away adjusting these. I assume before I had the truck, I hardly ever use the parking brake, but I do once in a blue moon. But probably a few people before I had the truck, it was used when I bought it, had 37,000 miles on it when I bought it in 2012. It's now 2021. They probably put the parking brake on and did some driving with it, but they're not horrible. They're actually, the frictions on these, and these aren't brakes like you'd stop your truck with. These are brakes that you just use as a parking brake. So there's not like they get a ton of friction wear. And honestly, the new pads don't look much different than these as far as that goes. But look at these. Everything's all rusty and nasty in here. It's 21 years old. And I just decided, or 20 years old, I just decided to hell with it. I'm gonna put all new parts in because I can. And so I got a chance to check out my rear wheel bearings and all of that, and that all looked pretty dang good. So let's go take a look at the hubs and stuff and the axle, and I'll give you a quick once over on what you need to go through when you get this off, so you don't have to sit and go into a half panic like I did. I wasn't sure what I was looking at first, and I'll explain that in just a sec. Okay, so here's the hub. This is the right side. They're identical. The hub. This is the inner bearing. This little doodad here on the inner bearing comes off with the teeth on it. Teeth go toward the roller bearing. So when this is an oil slinger ring, this thing here, you don't want to damage this, because if you damage this, it does not come with the bearing. It's a Ford specific part from the dealership, so it's probably a $40 part. Now I don't know how much it costs. I didn't check it, but I didn't bung it up, so it doesn't matter. This is the bearing that came off. That oil slinger rides right on the face of the bearing, so it's sort of a, you know, maybe a little bit of a thrust washer, but at the same time, apparently these little fins on here sling the oil about when the bearing is rotating. And so there's that. And then this all resides in the hub on this race, like that. And then this seal goes on in there over it. Then that all slides onto the spindle. Then you have your front bearing, and you have this kind of ratcheting lock nut deal, which is kind of confusing to look at if you've never seen one. It takes a special socket to get it off. You can get the socket at O'Reilly for like $21. I'll show you what that looks like in a second here. Okay, so here's the special socket, and the way this operates is these four ends here. If you can see that, they lock into this ratcheting deal right here, and as you draw that down, it draws this ratcheting into these other deals in here. And the spec is, when you tighten this down, 60 foot-pounds on used bearings, back off 7 clicks. On new bearings, back off 5. So you crank this down to 60 foot-pounds on your torque wrench. It's a 1/2-inch drive. You crank it down to 60 foot-pounds, then you back it off on new bearings, 5 clicks. Click, 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 5 clicks. And then but if you have used bearings like I have, you only back it off, or you back it off 7, not 5 on new, 7 on used. Then on the other side, it's a simple. There's nothing fancy about this bearing here. It just resides behind this lock nut. And if you notice, there's a kind of a keyway on here, like would go into a keyway on the spindle. There's a slot in the spindle this goes on. So that holds this part stationary as you ratchet this part to bring down the run out on this bearing, or the in play on this bearing. So that's how that goes. There's no other parts, no other thrust washers or anything. This must act as a thrust washer. It rides right against the inner bearing, the inner part of the bearing. So, and the cage. Now looking at mine, let's get a clean paper towel. Looking at mine, I'm going to wipe it down. When you open this, when you pop these bolts out of this hub, on the other side there's, I don't know, 6 bolts or something that hold the axle in. The axle's going to be a little bit tough to get out. It's like it's not going to want to move. Take a screwdriver or a punch or something and just kind of work it with a mallet. And you'll notice that it eventually starts to separate from the spindle. The axle will separate from the spindle a little bit. Let me turn it over so you can see what I'm talking about. The axle will start to separate from this surface right here. And eventually what you can do is just get a real thin blade screwdriver, stick it down in there, and give it a little bit of a pry. And it will come away from this. There's no sealant in here because what's on the end of the axle, let me grab it, on the end of the axle is an O-ring. So there's no sealant on this, no gasket, just this face O-ring. And those are available. I got mine in stock at O'Reilly. I'll put the part numbers that I used for this project in the links below. And you can order them online and figure out what O'Reilly's has them, and then you can drive over and pick them up. Or you can order them in. Either way, I went to the Hub store, which is about 4 miles from where I live, and they have a warehouse there, and they had all the stuff in stock. So there's an O-ring right here, and that's what makes this axle a little hard to get out of this hole here. So that's how that works. So you just pull that axle then straight out and put a drain pan under, because you're going to get maybe a 1/4 cup of lube oil out of here is going to come pouring out. As soon as you break that O-ring face seal loose, that O-ring seal, you're going to get about probably a 1/4 cup of lube onto your driveway. So put a drain pan under. And it's special lube from the dealership, according to Ford anyway. I have laid in a quart of that to replace what I lost here. So back to the bearing part of it. Looking at my bearings, another clean towel. Looking at my bearings, these bearings have 140,000, unless they were changed within the first 37,000 in the truck had on when I bought it, which I doubt. So these are probably original, and there's no discoloration, no heat treating. They don't look blued like a firearm. You know how a heat turns steel a light yellow, and then after, if you hold the heat on long enough, it'll turn to a blue, and then a dark blue, almost black. There's no heat treating, so there's no discoloration. There's really, my bearing looks just like the day it was new, and the race as well. The race is down in this bore here, and it's smooth and not marked up and no heat. So there's nothing wrong with these bearings. Here's the rear, or I should say the inner. This is the inner bearing. Let's wipe that and clean. Same thing. I mean, there's no burnishing, no galling, no discoloration. It's nice, and I mean, you're going to get this wobble in these bearings. That's that way when they're new, because there has to be some clearance in here, because what this rides on is a film of oil. You know, it doesn't ride metal on metal. The metal rides with a coat of oil between it, so there has to be some movement to accommodate that oil. Now, when you reinstall these, they say, and I was a little skeptical about this when I started looking at it, but they say to pack this with wheel bearing grease, even though the rear end is oil lubricated from the pumpkin on the rear end is full of oil, full of bearing or gear oil, basically, and that gear oil makes its way down to these bearings, and there's a sump in this hub right here. If you look in here, there's a sump there that holds a few ounces of oil, or an ounce or so of oil, right in this little sump area, and you fill that when you put the bearing back in service. And even though that's in there, they still say that you should pack the bearing with wheel bearing grease. I was a little skeptical about that, because I've seen guys install these on YouTube videos and they don't seem to pack them with grease, and I was like, well, what's the grease gonna do if it's a special rear end lubricant, which is probably just like 90 weight or something, I would guess. They're gonna, you know, maybe pollute that, but that's everything I see. Even the factory manual says to pack this bearing with grease, and I assume the reason for that, these bearings, pack them with grease and put them back together even though they're oil lubricated. I would assume the reasoning for that is I don't want this to run dry when you first get it going, until the oil from the pumpkin makes its way back down here, because I've got this all washed out with solvent now, and everything's nice and clean. So So we're going to repack this with wheel bearing grease and just say, well, it sounds goofy to me, but okay, it's in the manual. It's in the Haynes manual as well. So, but the thing is, when you put the seal back in that holds this inner bearing on, you drop that inner bearing down in there, and when you put the seal back in the hole, don't forget to put this thing in first. It goes in just like that. Then this is the seal that came out. Now here's what was confusing last night. And I had to turn the camera off till I figured out what was going on. When I pulled this off using the 3-jaw puller, Harbor Freight, they just sell you a set of 3 of these, 3 different sizes. This is the biggest of the 3. It's like, they're cheap, but they're crap too. They're garbage pullers. A good puller costs you $200, $880 for that size puller. But they give you 3 of these cheap broke dick pullers that they sell from China, and but it worked. It doesn't take a lot of force to get this off. This seal is a kind of a rubberized insert. So when I pulled it off, when I pulled this off, this hub off, part of this stayed on the spindle, which kind of freaked me out a little bit because I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I've never had this apart before. I've never done this job before on this truck. This part, this ring, this bent up ring, when I pulled this off, this seal did not release from the spindle, and it left these 2 pieces, this bent up ring here, which pulled out of the back of the seal, out of this crimp, and it left this on the spindle. And I thought, what the hell is that, a wear collar? Why does it look like that? I didn't know what I was looking at. I wasn't sure because I didn't, so I had to go do some research. And all it was is that it pulled this was stuck on the spindle, and when I pulled the hub off, this part of it came out on the hub, and you can see it's kind of bent up because I pried it out. And this part here stayed on the spindle. This ring I was able to just pull off. You know, it would fit around that somehow. Chinese finger puzzle. Anyway, I was able to pull this bent up ring off, and I'm like, oh, that looks like it came out of this crimp. And then this part was on the spindle. So I just used the 3-jaw puller and pulled this off the spindle. But it's no big mystery, because here's what one that comes out in one piece looks like. It looks like this. And this is big. I mean, check this out. This is real. This is a big seal. I mean, big by my standards. I don't work on dump trucks. I just have a pickup truck. That thing's 4 1/8 wide. This seal. It's 4 1/8 inches wide, and the bore size of it is, I don't know, 3 and it's like 13/16, 3 and 13/16 roughly. The part that goes in. And here's something else. Look at this. There's red stuff on here. There's some kind of high temp silicone or something that they siliconized the inside of this before they drove it in, because there's still some of it in there. I need to get some Scotch-Brite and get that all out of there. And so when this is actually in there, they went ahead, Ford did, the factory, they used some kind of red high temp RTV. It's RTV is what it is. It's what it sure looks like to me. And this is kind of a funny seal because it's it's a seal within a seal. So if you look at the guts of it, this is a sealing surface here that this rubber rides on, and this spins. This spins inside of that bore. So this is fixed more or less solidly to the spindle, and then the seal is actually against this surface here that turns. Apparently turns. I don't know. Yeah, because this is fixed to the hub. So this is actually the sealing surface. It doesn't seal on the spindle like like your travel trailer ones do. It's double lip seal. This is different. This is like solidly affixed to the spindle because it's got like a rubber. There's no RTV in this part, so don't put any on that. But I think when I put it back together, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to use, there's a spring in here. And sometimes when you're tapping these into place, that spring can get dislodged or get out of position. And watch Wes work. He always puts white lithium grease in this groove here. And that's to hold that seal spring in place and make sure that doesn't get knocked out when you're driving this home. And it just butts up flat, the inside of this surface to this. So I would say he uses some Loctite on this, but I'm going to use that red high temp silicone just like is on here already. And I'm going to put that around the face here very carefully, being sure none of it gets into here. And I'm going to fill this void with white lithium grease. And then I'm just going to take a wood block. I'm going to set it in as far as I can set it. I'm going to knock it down flat. Not this one, of course. I have new ones. So that's what that's all about. So it's not a big mystery. It's nothing to panic over. You just take this ratcheting nut off using your special socket. Pull this bearing with a set of little hooks. You know, your little hooks. Grab a hold of the bearing, pull it out. You're going to get some lube come out. Then take your 3-jaw puller, pull the hub off. The seal may or may not come out in one piece. One did and one didn't for me. This is the one that came out in one piece. It actually looks literally undamaged at all. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a thin-bladed screwdriver, and you're just going to carefully, because this is what's going to give this edge of this. You're going to knock it right in between, and you're just going to work this seal out. Pry it out, and it'll come out just like that in one piece, hopefully. And then you have your oil slinger, and then you have your inner bearing. So if you see any discoloration or any signs of bad wear on any of these, now is a good time to take a steel punch, knock these races out, and put in new bearings. I'm not going to. They don't need it. They look like brand new. So I'm just putting them back in. It's not a horrible job to get this apart again anyway, if and when they decide to go. But I felt them before I took them off. They had no in play ever. There was nothing moving. It was just you know, perfectly normal. So that's the way it's going to go back together. So sorry to be so long-winded on it. Just telling you what I went through, and you can go ahead and take these off, because I'll guarantee you, you're not going to rebuild these parking brake hubs, these drum brakes. You're not going to rebuild that without taking this off. That's if you can do it, make a video and show me how you did it, because I will guarantee you this is in the way. You cannot do it. It's not possible. I don't think. Prove me wrong. Okay, I'm going to devise my own best way to take this apart. It may or may not be the best way, but it's the way that I'm going to do it, having learned from the other side yesterday. So there's a couple things you want to note on here before you take it apart. And that is, just for your own knowledge, this is the star adjuster. It's full of crap. That's the star adjuster. Notice that that's pointed to the rear. Now, if you took this and 180'd it to the other side of the truck, on the right-hand side, passenger side, this adjuster is going to point toward the front. And that's critical, because when you get this back together, you don't want to find out you put that in backwards. Your brake will still work, but you won't be able to get through the adjusting hole to adjust it. So, because the star will be outside the adjusting hole. So make sure that on the driver's side, the star points to the rear on the adjuster, and on the passenger side it points to the front, because this is the exact same unit. You can buy these. They're ambidextrous. They go one side to the other, and they're exactly the same. So if you flip this around 180 and put it on the other side, the adjuster hole will be at the front. That's important. Okay, the other thing that you want to know is that, and I don't think it makes any difference at all, but when you'll notice that on this big spring that's up back in behind here, that big spring's got a long leg and a short leg, and on this one, the long leg of it's going to point toward the front of the truck. So the long leg of the spring will be toward the front of the truck. On this side, this is the driver's side. And on the other side, the long leg of the spring will be pointed toward the rear of the truck. So everything is flipped side to side. So I'm going to take this apart and you'll see the best way. At least, I don't know if it's the best way. It's the way I'm going to do it. You can do it however you want. These little guys right here are a pain in the ass to get out. They're really springy. So what I'm doing there here is pushing in and then reaching around the back side, and I'm going to take these off first. Turn it 1/4 turn, and then it should come right off. The spring next, the bottom one. And then we gotta get this top one, this outer one here. This is the spring I just took off, that little one. That's your adjuster spring. This is your brake returns, or your brake return spring, as well as the big one that's in behind there. So yeah, I guess they figured you really need to have some positive springage on there. That's the ticket. Okay, that leaves the adjuster, which is going to fall out right now. That was pointing to the rear. And then, theoretically, you can just horse this out like this. Okay. That does mean you got to horse it back in like that. And that's the hard part. Okay, so you can see that's all apart now. It's kind of filthy, so I'm going to clean it up. Big hole, long end, okay, big hole versus small hole, big hole, short end. This has to go on here, and trust me, this is not going to be elegant. I'll guarantee you. It's not going to be an elegant install. Point of order, the spring has to go under. So this idea of stretching it over from the top, that don't work on this one. That's why I had to take the axle off. Once you get it in there, if it falls apart like this, you gotta take it back out because you won't get it back in. You won't get the spring back in. So you just have to kind of bend this spring to get this in place. Now, this is my own procedure. I'm going to install the hold down on this shoe right here. Otherwise, this shoe's going to flop around every which way. This goes in from behind. Okay. Notice I have this engaged where there should be. This is in the little relief for the actuator, and the pivot is on the pivot. So, and now I'm going to put this on. Take your long bent needle nose. If you don't have one, go buy one. Hold it right over here. Let's do it this way. Don't get your needle nose in the way of that slot. And trust me, wear your safety glasses, because this thing friggin' flies around. If it comes out of these pliers, which it probably will, it really tends to fly. Okay, get your there it went. And it fell in the solvent that time. Good, it'll be nice and clean now. Like I said, this isn't going to be elegant. Trust me, it gets worse. Ouch. Almost had it that time. At least it didn't fly 20 feet that time. There's how you do it right there. Okay, now for the part that's really inelegant. I'm going to take this clamp off of here, since that shoe is now basically affixed in position. See what I've got here now? I've got this is on, this is in place, this is hooked on the spring, and now we're ready to stretch this all the way around to there. I highly recommend for this part of it you put gloves on, or you'll be bleeding when you're done. I hate working in gloves, but sometimes it's not a bad plan. Get everything out of the way over here. Probably going to block the light with my body, but I have to be in here. Okay, I've got it worked over this edge here. We're close. And there it is. Now it's ready for its adjuster. So that didn't go half bad. All I did is I levered off of this with my hands and stretched this to where it's supposed to go. Okay, now it's tight against the backing plate. Now all it needs is it needs this hold down, the adjuster, and 2 more springs. And the star to the back. Now, I feel like it might be in our best interest to put this clip on. Blam! I don't even know where that one went. See how it always goes the wrong way? That's Murphy's Law. That's turning wrong. Alright, we'll get her. We'll get it. It might take 20 tries, maybe 30. Oh, that was so close. That was so close. Let's get a little more in the middle. Thing is, you can't block that slot, or it won't. Your pliers is in the way of it. Then it won't go through. So we're 180 off, just like we always are. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Okay. All right. All right. There's that. I don't know. 5 times, 6 times. Have I scared you off from doing this job yet? Ooh, I was so close to pinching myself in the pliers that time. I mean, that was seriously close. There. All right. There we go. That one's on there. That's on there. Now this one's pretty easy. This is just your adjuster spring. It just goes in this little hole over here. Oops. Come on. There. Okay, there. It's in. All right, that, fellas, is how you put one of those back together. It's, like I said, it isn't going to be elegant, but it does go. This went far better than I thought, better than I did yesterday. You just got to strong arm this around. You can make sure that spring is under this, though. That fat spring in the back has to go under all this stuff. And then just put this one on and strong arm this one into place. That's what I did, as you saw. Notice this right here. That'll be pertinent in a minute. This keyway. This is Sill Glide. It's for rubber and O-rings and that kind of thing. I want to make sure that my seal slicks over this without getting cut or damaged or caught. So I'm putting some of this on here. I'll put a little in the on the seal itself. Don't touch the seal on the threads. Don't do it. This is the synthetic rear axle lubricant, Motorcraft. This is what's in the rear end. And I know that for a fact because I did the pinion seal a bit ago. And this is what Ford, I got this at the dealership. This is what they said to put in it. So that's what's in the rear end. It's SA 75 140 gear oil. Synthetic Motorcraft. Part number 1079709-02. Take about this much of it and fill this void back here. Let's get our spill tray under. Click. Okay, that's 60 pounds. Now it says to back it off. Air Force. Back it off 7 clicks because my bearings are not new. So let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, see your axle shaft, obviously. This is an O-ring. It's probably still good, but it's been compressed for 20 years. We'll look at it anyway. What's that? Who knows? Oh, I know what it was. Okay. Doesn't look like there's a thing in the world wrong with it. It's not misshapen. It doesn't have any scuffs, tears, scratches, gouges, nothing. Looks great. But it's going away. Anyway. Cleaning out the groove. O'Reilly part number, this is a Dorman 926-163. Rear axle O-rings for the Superduty. Yep, looks good. So glide. There you go. On doing this, leave these out. Leave these bolts out. Just leave the axle right in there, kind of supporting it. Or support it on the bearings. This is all set up now. But you can turn this a lot easier, and you can hear the parking brake shoes better. So leave these bolts out. And then after you get this adjusted, then put these bolts in. Facing the rear of the truck, it needs to go clockwise. Let's see, I can't tell if it's actually turning the thing or just if it's just snapping around in there. Yeah, that was a turn there. Get the old dried up Loctite off. These have blue Loctite on them. Get that off of there. I just want to run these flush. Okay. Now we can get our torque wrench set to 80, 70, 80. Anti-seize. Okay, so this plug right here, it's right behind the U-joint at the rear end, driver's side. Take a 3/8 ratchet, get it in there, crack that loose. That's the fill hole for the rear diff. We need to make sure that some oil runs out. If not, we're going to add a little bit. We didn't lose very much. So that looks pretty good. I'm just going to toss a little back. Alright, we know that's full. And tighten that back up. All right, we're full up. We can put the tires back on. Okay, we're all done. Test drive went great. Parking brake works perfectly. I got about, I can't push the pedal any closer than about I don't know, 2/3 of the way maybe. Everything appears to have gone as planned. I topped off the rear end, put the little rubber plugs back in the backing plates for the adjusters. There's all the junk parts right there, and that's pretty much how I was able to pull off a rebuild of my parking brake on the 01 F-250 Ford Superduty. So yeah, I hope this video helps you out. It sure would have helped me out because there wasn't any decent videos up on this. This might go a little long, but hey, you know, I think if you're going to try to do this job, all the help you can get might be worth it. Okay. Anyway, enjoy. Glad you watched.